In the news tonight, Jordanians from all walks of life expressed their outrage over the killing of Ra'ed Zaiter, who was laid to rest today in the West Bank city of Nablus, his body wrapped in both the Jordanian and Palestinian flags. Occupation forces in the Gaza Strip killed 3 Palestinians in what they allege was a retaliation for a mortar bomb fired at the army. And former Egyptian Foreign Minister Amr Moussa says Egyptian leaders should leave the door open for the Muslim Brotherhood to re-enter politics if they accept the constitution. Good evening. The shooting dead of Jordanian Judge Ra'ed Zaiter by Israeli soldiers as he was crossing the King Hussein Bridge into the occupied West Bank dominated today's debate in the lower house of Parliament. In remarks during the session, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour said Israel has offered an official apology to Jordan. He said the government voiced its full rejection and condemnation of the crime and called on the Israeli government to carry out an immediate investigation into the shooting incident. The government, Mansour said, is insisting on a joint investigation in which Jordanian security agencies should take part, adding that Israel's excuses following preliminary investigation do not justify the shooting. The Prime Minister noted that the government's handling of the case will depend on the deeds and not the words of the Israeli government. Meanwhile, Jordanians from all sectors and representing all walks of life protested the killing of Zaiter. Here's more.
Angry protesters gathered in front of Israel's embassy today and in front of the parliament, chanting against Israel's consistent violations on border crossings and demanding the expulsion of Israel's ambassador from Amman. Outside the Israeli embassy, the protesters raised placards condemning what they called a vicious crime that took the life of Jordanian Judge Ra'ed Zaiter by an Israeli soldier yesterday on the Israeli side of King Hussein Bridge. The 38-year-old judge was born in the Palestinian territories and had a doctorate in international law and worked as a judge in an Amman magistrate's court. He was married and had 2 young children. In Nablus today, a funeral procession was held for Zaiter, wrapped in both the Palestinian and Jordanian flags, with thousands attending, including his father, who came from Jordan.
My son was pushed to the ground, insulted and shot dead in cold blood by Israel's occupation forces.
Condemnations poured in from all sectors. Speaker of the lower house of Parliament, Atif al-Tarawna, said the legislature would not spare any effort to uncover Israeli lies and the crisis it creates in disregard of treaties and conventions. Members of the House stood in a moment of silence in honor of Zaiter, and one by one took the microphone to condemn, using the harshest terms, Israel's act. The Senate, in a statement, called for measures to end Israel's disrespect of human life, punish the perpetrators and send a message to the Israeli occupiers that Zaiter's death will not pass without punishment. The Judiciary Council also denounced the killing of an unarmed civilian on a private visit to the Palestinian territory as murder and said it would not accept any pretext by the Israeli occupation authorities. The council said it's following up closely with the Jordanian government and with the Palestinian Authority on Zaiter's murder using the legal and diplomatic channels. And at the Palace of Justice, members of the Jordan Bar Association, joined by judges, staged a sit-in, putting all court proceedings on hold to pay respect to Zaiter. They denounced what they dubbed as a terrorist crime, wearing the lawyers' gowns inside out in protest. Israel today regretted the death of Judge Ra'ed Zaiter and expressed its sympathies to the people and government of Jordan. Radha Bush for the news at 10.
And in Khan Yunis, hundreds of Palestinians marched in the funeral procession of 3 Palestinians, members of the Islamic Jihad group, killed by an Israeli airstrike on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said the group had fired a mortar bomb at its forces and that direct hits were confirmed. Islamic Jihad said its men attacked Israeli troops who had entered the Gaza Strip through Israel's border fence. Earlier, Hamas said an Israeli drone had crashed on the Gaza side of the frontier, but the Israeli military said the drone came down because of a technical malfunction. And over to Syria, where Syrian soldiers backed by Lebanese Hezbollah fighters took full control over farmland on the northern edge of Yabrud. The farmland is the last major rebel stronghold near the Lebanese border north of Damascus. Military sources in contact with fighters on the ground said the Syrian army killed dozens of rebel fighters as they took over the Rima Farms district outside the town. Capturing Yabrud is believed to help Syrian forces secure the land route linking the Mediterranean coastal stronghold with Damascus and choke off a cross-border rebel supply line from Lebanon. And across the border in Lebanon, security sources said one person was wounded when 4 rockets were fired from Syrian rebel-held territory towards the village of Nebi Sheet, an area believed to include Hezbollah weapon stores. They said the rocket fire appeared to be a response to the fighting in Yabrud. In Egypt, around 25 people were killed in a collision between a bus and a pickup truck in Suez. The collision occurred in the early morning hours when the bus slammed into a pickup truck parked on or near the road due to a lack of vision caused by fog. The bus is owned by a private transportation company and was carrying 50 people. State-owned Al-Ahram newspaper confirmed that the collision resulted in the deaths of 25 people and the injury of the other 25. In a rare call for reconciliation, former Egyptian Foreign Minister Amr Moussa said Egyptian leaders should leave the door open for the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood to re-enter politics if the group accepts the constitution. As head of the body that rewrote Egypt's constitution, Moussa believes democracy includes roles for Brotherhood supporters, provided they peacefully abide by the new document approved by over 90% of voters in January. Moussa has thrown his weight behind Defense Minister Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who is expected to announce his candidacy for the presidency in a few days and easily win. Moussa said he is confident Sisi could lead Egypt out of uncertainty, admitting though it would not be an easy task.
Well, I see the future emanating from one fact, that this constitution did not exclude any citizen, any group, any current political or anything of that kind from the full enjoyment of rights, contrary to what the constitution adopted under the Muslim Brotherhood has stipulated. They excluded so many of the members of the previous regime to them. He is really in the full picture of the problems of the country and what should be done. That's why I am supporting him, because I am convinced that he can do the job. And the job is to rebuild this country, to lead a process, a viable process, to rebuild a country that indeed is suffering of a lot of problems.
The Libyan parliament has dismissed Prime Minister Ali Zaidan after a tanker laden with oil from a rebel-held port reportedly broke through a naval blockade. MPs called a vote of confidence in Zaidan after they were told the North Korean flagged ship had escaped to sea. Defense Minister Abdullah Al-Thani was named interim prime minister. Earlier, Libyan officials said they had complete control of the tanker as it tried to leave the port of Sidra, but the rebels rejected the assertion. Separatist militants have occupied 3 major eastern ports since August, seeking a greater share of the country's oil revenues as well as autonomy. Clashes erupted at a hospital in Istanbul where a teenager died 9 months after he was struck on the head by a tear gas canister fired by police. Then 14-year-old Berkin Elvan got caught up in street battles in Istanbul between police and protesters in June, and he has been in a coma since then. Police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse more than 2,000 people, mainly students from the Middle East Technical University, who blocked a main highway to protest against the teenager's death. Those protests quickly turned into Turkey's biggest anti-government demonstration in years, amid unhappiness with Erdogan's 11-year rule. Ukraine's interim leaders established a new National Guard and appealed to the United States and Britain for assistance against what they called Russian aggression in Crimea under a post-Cold War treaty. There was no let-up in the war of words, with the pro-Russian regional parliament in Crimea approving a declaration of independence that will take effect if people on the Black Sea Peninsula vote to unite with Russia in a referendum on Sunday. Here's more.
Pro-Russia self-defense militias remain on patrol in Crimea. As the Russian flag flies overhead, the situation on the ground appears to be calm. Yet far from the highly autonomous region, a debate on Ukraine's future is raging in Kiev. Acting Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk says Russia is responsible for all the recent escalation.
It is not a bilateral conflict. It is nothing else but actions of the Russian Federation driven toward the destruction of the system of global security.
Russia has denied responsibility for the militia groups in Crimea, despite approving troops in the region to protect ethnic Russians. In response, Kiev's interim leaders have established a new National Guard.
We're asking to create the National Guard as the basis of the internal forces of Ukraine. Its aim is to protect the country and citizens from any criminals and external and internal aggression. We're asking to declare partial mobilization of the National Guard of Ukraine and the armed forces of Ukraine.
Оголосити часткову мобілізацію до Національної гвардії України і до Збройних сил України.
The parliament also said it would dissolve the Crimean Assembly if it did not cancel its upcoming referendum.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's ousted leader Viktor Yanukovych is insisting that he remains Ukraine's legitimate president and commander-in-chief. He said he would return to Kyiv and appeal to the armed forces to defy any criminal orders handed down by his foes. In a statement in Russia, where he fled last month, Yanukovych said he had not been dismissed in accordance with Ukraine's constitution. Yanukovych said the presidential elections scheduled for May 25th would be illegal and illegitimate and promised to return to Kyiv as soon as circumstances allowed. The International Police Agency, the Interpol, says it does not believe the disappearance of a Malaysia Airlines plane was a result of a terrorist attack. Interpol's Secretary General Ronald Noble suggested that two men who boarded using stolen passports and had aroused suspicion may have been smuggled by traffickers. The plane carrying 239 people on board has now been missing for 4 days, with a search involving crews from 10 nations. Malaysian police had earlier said that one of the young travelers was seeking to join his mother in Germany and that the issue was one of human smuggling and not terrorism. Interpol is working with member countries to follow all leads, including human trafficking, organized crime, and terrorism. A very special convoy, the length of a soccer pitch and carrying a giant gas turbine, started its journey in eastern France before heading towards Antwerp, Belgium, where it will be loaded onto a ship that takes it to the U.S. Dubbed a very exceptional convoy, the giant turbine was built in France by General Electric and weighs 390 tons. Moving at a maximum of 20 kilometers per hour, the convoy is made of a giant stretch trailer, towed and pushed by 2 trucks and 2 tractors. After 3 years of intricate planning, logistic teams have had to get rid of street signs, trees have had to be cut, and roads have had to be modified for the convoy to be able to pass through. All this at a total cost of 800,000 euros. Qamar Hashim, a 10-year-old boy, is the youngest Iraqi photographer to win several local awards. His work of peaceful life and scenic views that show a different side of the war-torn country has earned him awards in both domestic and overseas photography contests. He tours the streets of Baghdad to capture people and scenic spots with a single camera that seems overly large for his size. His father, a professional photographer, started training his boy a few years ago, and as soon as his skills improved, his talent was recognized. However, and because of his age and size, Qamar Hashim often finds it hard to convince people that he is a professional photographer. We begin with cycling, where John Degenkolb of Germany won the third stage of the Paris-Nice cycle race to take the overall lead. Degenkolb completed the 180-kilometer stage from Toulouse to Nice in a time of 4 hours, 27 minutes and 26 seconds. He now leads the race overall by 8 seconds from former leader Nasser Bouhanni of France, with Moreno Hofland of the Netherlands in third. Tomorrow's fourth stage runs for 201.5 kilometers from Nevers to Belleville. Barcelona are preparing for their Champions League last 16 second leg against Manchester City tomorrow. The Catalan side notched up a 2-0 advantage in Manchester, but suffered a shocking 1-0 La Liga defeat at Valladolid this weekend in one of the worst performances of the season. Though in the past 6 years, Barca have reached at least the semi-finals of the Champions League, still the pressure is on Gerardo Martino's side after the inconsistency in their performance. And finally, cold, cloudy and rainy weather continues tonight with a chance for hail and thunder. As for tomorrow, a further drop in temperature is expected with a continued chance for thunderstorms and possibly snowfall during the night in the southern hilly areas. Winds will be westerly brisk with strong gusts at times. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect partly cloudy conditions with a chance for showers, while winds will be northerly moderate to brisk and the sea is slightly choppy. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. Jordanians from all walks of life expressed their outrage over the killing of Ra'ed Zaiter, who was laid to rest today in the West Bank city of Nablus, his body wrapped in both the Jordanian and Palestinian flags. Occupation forces in the Gaza Strip killed 3 Palestinians in what they allege was a retaliation for a mortar bomb fired at the army. And former Egyptian Foreign Minister Amr Moussa says Egyptian leaders should leave the door open for the Muslim Brotherhood to re-enter politics if they accept the constitution. And that's all for tonight. Have a good evening.